That nonviolent Jesus, that radical, that prophetic voice, that person who was in contact with his source in a way that was like, we can be human in a different way. We can be human in a new way. We can be human in a way that stands against empire and those forces that dehumanize. And we can hang out with like the people who are completely fucked up, right? Like, I thought growing up that you had to be like surrounded by all the people who had their shit together and had like blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, that's not the Jesus way. He was with the prostitutes and the tax collectors and anybody who had an openness. The table is open.
This is Unconditioning, Discovering the Voice Within, with Whitney and Jenkins. Hello, and welcome to the 31st episode of Unconditioning, Discovering the Voice Within, where I bring on guests and we talk about the inner authentic voice and the challenges and the rewards that come from following it. This week, I have with me Roger Butts. Roger is an author of a book that he recently released called Seeds of Devotion, Weekly Contemplations on Faith. He spent 7 years as a hospital chaplain for a 500-bed hospital system in Colorado Springs. He's an ordained minister for 20 years as a Unitarian Universalist, and he's a former staffer on Capitol Hill. And Roger was an absolute blast to talk to during this interview. I had such a great time with him. He is so easygoing and humorous and full of curiosity and really interested in doing his part in making the world a better place. And so I'm really excited to share this interview with you. Here is Roger Butts.
Oh my God, the pressure. It's too much. So you're in Pittsburgh.
I am.
I'm in Colorado Springs.
Yes, I was in Colorado Springs over maybe the end of September for a wedding. One of my really
good place to get married.
Yeah, it was beautiful. The weather was perfect. Not a cloud in the sky.
Oh,
yeah.
We get a lot of blue skies. So what's on your mind today? What's on your heart? Tell me everything about yourself.
About myself? Well,
yeah, I'm not the interviewer, am I?
Well, you could be if you wanted. We could like switch positions. Ooh, wouldn't that be something?
You crazy kids.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to have you on here. I think there's probably a lot we can talk about, considering the theme of my podcast and what you seem to be up to.
Yes. How do you think art helps heal post-pandemic?
Post-pandemic.
How do you think art heals post-pandemic?
I think art is always healing, no matter what time.
100%.
And actually, I feel like the creative voice has a lot to do with our inner voice and who we are. So it's absolutely healing if we're connected to that source at all times.
Yes. I just got an assignment with that question, so that's why I asked. So I was like, okay, let's do some double dipping.
An assignment?
Yeah, like for this there's in Colorado Springs, because where I live has a reputation for being kind of an evangelical military, kind of place.
Okay.
But there are some really quirky, liberal, lefty, libertarian, independent along. And so my friend Ariana Plotton, who is a Unity minister with the independent newspaper, brought together a whole bunch of different clergy and religious leaders from the right and the left, and founded this thing called In Good Faith. And it's a column where we all share our insights about things. And there's a lot of commonality.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of common ground. We diverge in theological and political ways, but in other ways, and so she's lifting up our humanity. Yeah. So I got this assignment like, Roger, can you talk about how art heals after a pandemic?
Oh,
Sure, I
nice.
can do that.
Yeah, it seems like the core and the root of everything all starts from the same place when it comes to that kind of thing.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, as an actress, as a singer songwriter, as a person who loves poetry and prayer, I know that everybody who tries to do that vulnerable, risky, connecting thing has to get in touch with their broken places and their wholeness and all of those
Ooh,
things.
yeah, like the shadows are just as important as the light.
Yeah, and just operate out of that place and say, okay. But I think I'm going to say that I had a writing teacher once who said that all he did was figure out how much money he needed to survive every day, and then he would make that amount of money. And I think if this pandemic is really going to heal us, we might adopt that idea,
Yeah.
because that's the way of the artist, right? Is like, you know what, I can bequeath my no, I can't, but I can give my next generation $1 million and hoard it and hold on to it, or I can let this pandemic teach me that hoarding money is not the goal.
Well, yeah, it kind of interrupts the flow of abundance too, right? When you hold on to something, then it attracts that energy of holding on to, so
Right,
nothing is
like,
flowing to
I'm
you.
going to hold on. And how can you share yourself if you're like, oh, all
Hmm.
clenched up?
Right. And so, yeah, especially like in Los Angeles during COVID, everyone was hoarding like toilet paper and
Yes.
necessities like that, which was kind of frightening. Um,
Right. You were
so
like, get me to Pittsburgh, baby, I'm going back to Pittsburgh.
so if we look at abundance from that angle of hoarding, it's very different from like Eastern philosophies and Eastern ways of looking at it, of like abundance is all around us all the time. And
It's a total
it's
gift.
just, yeah.
I think Godspell, um, sort of resolved that once and for all. Remember that all good gifts? Remember that song?
Hmm.
I mean, you could start singing that song, I suspect. Um,
Well, you could too.
well, I could, but very badly. But all good gifts, that's the whole thing, right? All good gifts. I'm going to be grateful. I'm going to be grounded in gratitude, and just perfect.
Yeah, whatever you need will come to you, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we have resolved for your audience and for your congregation and for your followers that Godspell is the fountainhead.
Yeah.
Everything everything comes from Godspell. Thank you, Mr. Schwartz.
It all emerges from there. Yes.
This is the fountainhead. Some people call the fountainhead God. I call the fountainhead Godspell. So there.
I like that word. I never thought about the word God spell quite like I just thought about it until just now.
Our time here is done. Cricket,
Thank
grasshopper.
Excellent. Okay. So it seems like you have a super fascinating and interesting existence, right? And so one of the first things that I ask my guests when they come on the show,
Don't be mean to your guest. That's not the way to go.
one of the first questions that I ask is just to get back to more of the beginning of you and your story and your essence. When
Thank you.
is the first time that you realized that you had an inner voice of your own and it
Oh,
wasn't
love
influenced
it.
by like your environment or your family or your teachers? It was just purely a moment where you realized that that was you and
Mm,
you alone.
mm, mm. I love it. I will get back to you next week. I want to ponder that forever. I want to sit with that and be like, come on, inner voice, tell me when you were born in me. Um, I love that so much. um, I grew up in a very religious family. If the church was open, if the church door was open, we were there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a really good connection with my youth group. Um, the religion didn't really fit me, so I really had to struggle to un unload that
Yeah.
and reload myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to say this is like everybody else on your podcast has probably been like, well, at 3, the angels visited me and like gave me this voice. But I'm going to say that when I was in college, I ended up at Appalachian State University up in the mountains in North Carolina. And I ended up in a dorm that was a college, a liberal arts college in the middle of this state university. And I read James Joyce, Ulysses, and I read Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude. And I can remember reading for myself Less Than Zero and going to see the movie The Killing Fields. And having just visited James Joyce and Garcia Marquez, who I feel like live on my shoulder now, they're of blessed memory, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they've landed on my shoulder just to encourage me and cheer me on. They're part of my cloud of witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got to that place, I began to let myself write in ways that were really coming out of my source
Mm-hmm.
and my essence, which you've described as a little odd, and 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 I well, maybe you didn't describe it that way.
I
Maybe I
don't,
described it that way.
yeah, I don't think that I described that. I think you're putting that on yourself, but
Oh my God. Um, and so it was then that I was like, I can be as weird as I want to be. Garcia Marquez, James Joyce, they are grounded in the ability to write. They don't take that lightly,
mm-hmm.
but they just see things from such weird angles. And it was like permission giving. And then, you know, unloading my religious background, which now I've integrated into my life in a way that I'm not, you know, I'm not angry, I'm not any of those things. But what I had to do was really begin to have conversations with people and really give myself permission to go on the path that was mine alone.
Yeah.
And so I would say college really helped me see the world
Okay.
and let my voice come.
And
There were
so
times before that, but college was really important for
it
me.
really, yeah, stuck out to you. And it seems like you found writing as a vessel or a channel for you to be able to contact that voice in a very tangible way.
Oh yeah, I remember when I was like, so I ended up in DC. I worked on Capitol Hill and did some other things there. And I can remember myself being in these wonderful um, bars and restaurants in the middle of the afternoon and just writing and writing and writing. I never got any of that published. I never tried to get any of that published. It was for my own,
Mm-hmm.
it was for my own healing. It was for my own reparation,
Right.
restoration. But yeah, writing is my vessel. Um, I collect art, not expensive art, but I collect art. I listen to music. Music like gets me in a place that I just can't even describe. No, that's beyond
Exactly.
words.
Yeah.
Beyond words. I used to think that I could find words for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm like, it's not the goal. It's okay.
Yeah. Everything doesn't need words.
Oh my God. And try, like the universe is like, just try. But know that it's not gonna get there.
Or it won't be translated in any way that would be relatable to what you're trying to express anyway. So,
Exactly.
let me ask you this. Since you went on that path in college, did you completely abandon your religious ties altogether, or did you like maintain that kind of spirituality throughout? How did that adjust to where you are now?
Yeah, I have a friend who is more on the evangelical side, but he's like a hipster evangelical. And he's fascinating dude. And he says that we take this boat and it gets us to a certain place, and then we have to jump into another boat. And most of us try to like destroy the earlier boat and like sink it and do a Viking funeral on its ass and all that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
And he's like, the goal is to recognize where the gratitude is and where the good things are, and to recognize that it was a gift, could only take you so far. So I knew that I wasn't a Baptist anymore. Um, and but I did, and I had a very shallow understanding of what a Baptist was, by the way. But I didn't know what I was going to be. So I went to see this Methodist pastor, and he was like, "Roger, you sound like a Unitarian." I was like, "All right, let's go." And so I went down the street to this little house, and half my professors were in there, and they were doing like a communion for indigenous populations that had been exterminated, or at
Wow.
least attempted to be exterminated. And this was 1987 or something. I was like, "Oh yeah, baby, let's go. This is my
Yeah.
jam." And so um, when I when I really went on that journey, I was either going to be Quaker, Episcopalian, or UU. And and I landed with the Unitarian Universalist, but I'm still partially Quaker. I'm still partially Episcopalian. I'm still partially that Baptist person back there, because they're fiercely independent.
Mm.
Most Baptists right now, they're in this little phase where they're pretty conformist, but in their history, they're pretty independent. And so I became I went to work in politics, and then I realized I have a face that only a mother could love, and
Oh,
and so I
I don't
wasn't going to be involved.
I don't agree with you, but go ahead.
and and so and politics is like a contact sport, right? It's a
Yeah.
fight.
Hmm.
And I just didn't have that kind of personality. I didn't have that, you know, type A personality. And so even when I was working on Capitol Hill, I was hanging out with like Catholic workers and, people who were like dumpster diving and all that stuff, and the Unitarians who were doing interesting things. And so I went to seminary in Washington, D.C. at Wesley. And it was very, very supportive of Unitarian Universalist students, very supportive of a wide range of students. And I loved it. And so I became a parish minister.
Okay.
And then I went into hospital chaplaincy for 7 years, but now I'm back in the parish.
Okay.
So it's fun.
Nice. Could you explain what a Unitarian Universalist is exactly, what the essence of that is?
Yeah, the essence of Unitarian Universalism is this idea of landing in a place where, above all, we talk about the dignity of the human person and the interconnectedness of all life. Um, so it's a very liberal Protestant approach to church, um, which has now become almost interspiritual or multi-faith.
Hmm.
Um, and so in this town, my prior colleague was an atheist lesbian. My dear friend is Jewish and Buddhist and polyamory.
Hmm.
It's like, all right, it's a free for all, it's chaos, but the human dignity and the idea that the path is yours to take, as long as you're not harming anybody, as long as you're not like
Hmm.
dehumanizing. That's kind of Unitarian Universalism. And it's not that you can believe anything you want, but the parameters are pretty wide open. And for some of us, it works. I'm still tied to the way of Jesus, but not in the way that, like, my dear friend who works at New Life Church, which is pretty evangelical and big and powerful, he probably wouldn't call it the way of Jesus, but I do. So sue me, you know? And so that nonviolent Jesus, that radical,
Yeah.
that prophetic voice, that person who was in contact with his source in a way that was like, we can be human in a different way. We can be human in a new way. We can be human in a way that stands against empire
Right.
and those forces that dehumanize. Um, and we can hang out with, like, the people who are completely fucked up, right? Like, does like, I thought growing up that you had to be, like, surrounded by all the people who had their shit together and had, like, blah blah blah, and it's like, no, that's not the Jesus way. He was with the prostitutes and the tax collectors and the, anybody who had an openness. The table is open.
Yeah.
And so, what was your question? For God's sake, I don't even know. ADD is my friend.
No, I mean, I think you're doing a beautiful job with answering it because I simply asked to describe what Unitarian Universalist
Oh yeah,
exactly means. So you
yeah.
answered very specifically and wonderfully.
That's
Was,
Unitarian
yeah.
Universalism. And so, I've been a minister in that tradition for 20 years. This is my 20th year of ordination,
Nice.
and it's been fun. It's been a challenge. It's been difficult. I'm not going to lie. It's been, parish ministry and chaplaincy and all that is not always easy, especially during COVID. But here
Yeah.
we are.
I would imagine that over those 20 years too, there's been some pretty profound change just like within our society of like
Yes.
how we've morphed and are shaping ourselves. And so do you
I'd
want
say the
to
biggest thing
yeah.
is, I'd say the biggest change, and the one that is calling me forth in new ways and challenging me and inviting me to grow, is is the commitment to Black Lives Matter
Hmm.
and that whole protest, and really looking at the way that I'm complicit and ways that my privilege has not been you know put forth to be in solidarity and to be accomplices and co-conspirators with those who are suffering. And I've always been interested in that. I've always been attempting to do that. But it's a new there's a new urgency
Yeah.
after all these deaths, George Floyd, and it's a beautiful invitation. It's just one that is heart ripping. And so Kathy Kelly, who was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, came to speak at a church I was serving a few years ago. She would go and she would go to Afghanistan when it was being bombed, and she would build these networks and organizations of Afghan women to support them and strengthen them, and to stand against the war and just be there to say, stop bombing, stop bombing, stop bombing. Doesn't matter if they're Democrats or Republicans, they're bombing the shit out of people. And she would be there saying, the way of Jesus invites us to stop bombing. And she says she grew up in Chicago, and she was trying to get some money to survive in Chicago. And she was a high schooler, and she took a job in a butcher shop, like a one of these big plants that converted cows into
Yeah.
sausages or whatever, right? And she said her job was to throw parts into the grinder,
Wow.
whole cow parts, right, or whole pig parts, whatever.
Oh.
I'm sorry if this is too graphic. I apologize. I mean,
Well, I feel like there's coming a point to this. Go ahead.
it may be profound, it might not be, but she says that she would throw these parts in. She's like, I was surrounded and consumed by destruction and blood, and it was saturated. And I didn't even know. She was like, I was just blind to it. I was just doing this thing. And that's how I feel we all are around war and military and consumerism and and around racial justice and racial reparation. So we're saturated in it. And there are those who are like you, who are artists and who are seers and prophets and who are visionaries, who are saying there's a deeper way. You see, there's a deeper way of love. There's a deeper way of nonviolence. There's a deeper way of deep connection that lifts up the humanity of each person
Right.
and the sacredness of all the different parts.
Yeah, so how would you, as a minister, go about explaining or comforting or trying to make sense of all of this destruction to someone who might not be able to be more open right now?
Yeah. I would I tell stories. I tell stories. And I tell stories about the time that, Martin Luther King went to Watts and after the riots. And all the white media could think about, and all the white folks could think about, was the destruction of the property. How can you destroy that building? As if a building, like matters that much. How could you destroy that building? How could you destroy that? And the riot is the language that's being spoken there. We're invited to hear that language. And so King went to Watts and he met a young man, and the young man said, we won. We won. And King said, tell me about that. What do you mean? And he was like, we won because we made them pay attention. And what I find in that story is that always the focus of those of us who are privileged and comfortable and in our little suburban enclaves. I don't know if Pittsburgh has suburbs, but I
Oh,
imagine it does.
yeah, it definitely does, yes.
And we focus on the building. We focus on the building, like, how are you going to destroy that? What? And there's this young man asking, hey, pay attention. Hey, pay attention. So what we pay attention to, my friend, is what can liberate us and heal us, right? And so all the Black Lives Movement is asking us is to shift our attention to hear the language. My uncle is the love languages guy, the 5 love
That's your
languages.
uncle?
Yeah, he's a nice
Whoa.
man. And when I wrote this
Okay.
book, Seeds of Devotion, which is based on a Rumi quote,
I love
I asked
Rumi.
him, I was like, Uncle Gary, can you you know endorse my book? And he was like, Roger, you've got a beautiful way with words. It was the nicest no I've ever received. He was like, you have a beautiful way with words, but I'm a Southern Baptist minister. I can't I can't endorse your book. But it was so sweet, because what was he doing? He was connecting with me and saying, your path is different than my path, but I still love what you're doing.
Wow.
uh, so I tell stories,
I
and I
love
ask
that. Yeah.
people, I ask people, just shift your attention just a little bit. When I'm in a unity setting, I don't go in there and talk about cows being slaughtered, right, and butchered, right?
Right.
When I'm in a unity setting, I'm like, love invites us to ponder new ways of being. I just soften it up a little bit. When I'm with the Unitarians, I can really get it because they're used to it. Kathleen Norris, the beautiful poet and writer, says that when she goes to a Baptist church, she speaks of nothing but grace, and when she goes to a Unitarian church, she speaks of nothing but sin and evil, right? Because
Oh,
she
wow.
wants to
Yeah, she's
balance
speaking their
the
language. Yeah.
yeah, like she wants to balance it all and do all that stuff. So anyway, where are we? What would you like to talk about next, my friend?
Well, I would like to like bring up your book a little bit, probably. The Seeds of Devotion that your uncle did not endorse, but I'm going to.
No, God bless him. He
So,
was so stinking sweet.
um, I'm trying to like find a way to connect and segue where I'm trying to go. So your book is full of prayer and poetry and things of that nature. And so when
And
we're talking,
story.
yeah, and so when we're talking about like moments like Black Lives Matter, where there's like lots and lots of chaos, and it's almost a distraction for like tuning into ourselves and like taking that time in order to get to know ourselves, right?
Yes.
And where there's a lot of wisdom if we just are able to see that, but then that requires an awareness.
Yes.
And so,
Can I share with you my
yeah,
approach?
yeah, please.
So a couple of different places, right? The idea is to quiet ourselves enough to hear. To quiet ourselves enough to hear. So this is one of the prayers after I talk about, like, I've never heard God actually speak to me like in the way that some people like, Roger, you should go to the grocery store now. Like I can't hear God like that, right? And but the closest I came was one time I was going down to the Virginia suburbs, leaving DC on Thanksgiving to visit my friends, and the Indigo Girls came on the CD player, which I should explain a CD player to you perhaps, but in the car, and and that was the closest thing. Like something enveloped me in grace, and so this is the prayer after that. Listen, be quiet, be still, be gentle, relax your jaw, loosen your shoulders. Listen, be gentle, be still, be quiet. Let the silence and the stillness make sacred the place you're in right now. Look at the light or the table or the cloud or the moon or the wild wind through the wild trees. They too are a sacred text. Listen, be still, be gentle, be quiet. The world does not need your words. Let your mind crawl into your heart space and let it take a nap for a while. There's nothing to think, there's nothing to know. Surrender to that silence. Let a still quiet gently keep you just for a while. Amen. The idea is to empty ourselves enough so that when we hear those those voices which need to be heard, whether it's our partner or our spouse or our boss or Black Lives Matter, if we have space in our stillness, in our heart, in that place that of nothingness known to ourselves and to God, then if we have space in there, then those voices can be heard in a way that we don't have to react. And we can respond and say, this is the gift I can bring to this. This is the gift I can bring to this. And that's what this book is about. It's about like stories about COVID,
Hmm.
where I at midnight I see a nurse put on the protective equipment for a woman who knows that she's going to see her husband for the last time and go into that COVID room, and they're going to flip him over, and when they flip him over, he's going to die, and she's going to be there for it. But the nurse putting on that protective equipment and then taking it off, this is as sacred as the Last Supper. It's as sacred as the Garden of Gethsemane. It's as sacred as the Red Sea parting, or the Buddha dying, and blessing those people around him. This is an act of the sacred, coming in to our ordinary world. In the ordinary world, the sacred is all around us. We just have to have eyes to see and ears to hear. So this book is an attempt to say, stuff happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes the stuff is beautiful and sometimes the stuff is pretty rough. But, putting aside your judgment and words and all that, stuff happens. How are we going to get a prayerful, mindful approach to that stuff happening? And then what questions are we going to ask so that we really can get in touch with our deepest, truest self and engage the world from that place?
Yeah. Do you have questions that you could share that might help people with that?
Yeah. I write a story that is not my story, but I tell a story that is about a monastery that's dying. It's just like, oh my God, nobody wants to come see us. Nobody wants to come for spiritual direction. No young people are coming to our place. What are we going to do? And so, the the guy in charge goes to a rabbi who is known as a very wise person across town. And the rabbi says, I don't know how to help what you're looking for. I just don't know what to say to you. But this has been given to me. The Messiah is one of you. This Messiah is among you. And all of a sudden, okay. I don't think it's Roger. God forbid that it's Roger, but maybe Roger's the Messiah. It might be Whitney. Now, all right, what if I think it might be Whitney and it might be George around the corner? But even if the possibility exists that it's Roger, and even if the probability exists that it's Whitney, when I confront you and encounter you, I'm all of a sudden thinking, I'm not just serving soup to Whitney, I'm serving soup to the Messiah, to the sacred one, right? And so I tell this story, and then I offer up a little prayer called How is Love Transforming Me? And then I offer up some questions. How is love transforming you? And if you just sat with that for a week, that would be plenty,
Yeah.
or a day, or an hour, or 15 minutes. But how is love transforming you? What narratives in your mind need a refresh, right? Those monks were like, I don't like Whitney. I never liked Whitney. Right?
Yeah.
But the rabbi was like, Whitney might be the Messiah. Oh, look at the gifts that Whitney brings to the table, right? I refresh the narrative. How do you experience the love that will not let you go? This is one of my great images of the divine and the holy. It's a love that will not let you go. And then when and how have you learned something special and unique by looking into someone's face? Right? Now, the face is something I'm fascinated with. And the reason, can I just go on for a minute?
Yeah, please.
So the reason is there was a guy named Emmanuel Levinas, Jewish philosopher, 20th century. Many of his family members were killed in the Holocaust, in the Shoah. And instead of giving into cynicism, instead of giving into despair, instead of giving into hopelessness, which, at least for people like me is an easy invitation, right? He looks at his sacred scriptures, which is the Hebrew Bible, the Jewish scriptures, and all of that stuff that comes from them. And he comes up with a philosophy that involves the face. And the face is a revelation of God. A revelation of God. Just like the Bible is, or the scriptures, just like nature is, the face is a revelation of God. And before I can even say anything, when I see the face of Whitney or Marta, my beloved, or my kids, before I can say anything, make any judgment, make any kind of categorization, right, which is all head stuff, my heart knows what is revealed in that revelation, and that is, thou shalt not kill. And if you interpret that in a certain way, right, that there is the sacred one. Whitney is the sacred one right now, because I could see your face. In just a minute, I'll see Marta's face, right? And Roger is the sacred one too, right? And what we're invited to is allowing that person, a revelation of God, to flourish. To flourish. That's my whole religious system in a nutshell. And how did I get there? Godspell. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm just joking.
Well, what you just said reminded me of a lyric in Les Miserables, actually.
Oh,
And
hey, bring it.
to love another person is to see the face of God.
So, am I going to have to shift from Godspell to Les Mis as like, no justice? Don't challenge me. Don't make me grow on a Friday morning, Whitney. I love it. Right? That's the mystery. And in my tradition, I don't know, like lots of people are leaving religion, right? And there's good reason to leave religion. God bless them, right? In my tradition, we've become so fixated on the imminent, on those cries of that young man who like, pay attention, that we've forgotten that there is a little mystery that's beyond us. That's beyond us, bigger than us. And that mystery, which can't be named, but we sure enough can try. And the more that we can play with those names, the more open we'll be, right? That mystery is something that everybody wants to tap into. Whether we call it religious, spirituality, ethics, morality, beauty, doesn't matter. I mean, call it whatever you want, that we all want to connect with that source from which we can respond to the world with our gifts and talents and graces and beauty in a way that does no harm, right?
Right. Yeah. And it seems that though people might be leaving religion, the younger generation is very interested in spirituality and
Oh yeah,
mindfulness and
yeah,
meditation. And
yeah.
so, like, there's that hope that's springing forth, I think.
Here's what the questions are. Who am I? What do I want? And who or what is the divine, the sacred, the holy? Could be a who, it could be a what, it could be the force, and King asks the question, where are we? Who are we? And what are we called to be in this world, right? But there are a variety of ways to get to that. So, maybe the church is dying because of COVID and because we've been terribly, horribly irrelevant to the needs and wishes of people who are younger. But the church dying is no problem for me because the church will emerge anew. I have no problem with that. If it's not feeding your spirit, if it's not feeding your soul, if it's not connecting you with the mystery and your true self, let it go. Oh, what's that? What musical is that from?
Oh, I don't know. Could it be
Also the
something very
greatest.
cold?
Exactly. Oh my God! Once I did a service with Jen Chapin, who is Harry Chapin's daughter. She's from Brooklyn. Harry Chapin was the Cat in the Cradle guy. You know that song?
Yeah. Okay.
And his daughter is a beautiful musician. She lives in Brooklyn. And we did this whole service where she would play one of her songs and I would riff on it. She would play one of her songs and I would riff on it. music is just such a gateway drug to
Mhm.
oneness and unity and beauty. Well, now I've spoken too long. You didn't get to answer any of those questions. And now I feel like I've been cheated. If you had to listen to one musical
Oh,
that
geez.
would give you the insight to how the world is and what we're called to be and who we're called to be, what would it be? Whitney Ann Jenkins
Oh,
of
wow.
Pittsburgh.
If I had to. One musical that has all the answers to the mysteries of the world. Is that what you're asking me?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my.
You can give me two if you want, or three or four. Or maybe it's a play. Maybe it's a movie. Maybe it's a novel. Maybe it's your book. I don't know.
Yeah, these are challenging things that you're asking me.
Well, how does it feel to be on the other side of the camera, huh? Well,
Um,
maybe Seeds of Devotion, Weekly Contemplations
yeah,
on Faith by Roger
maybe
Butts is where you
maybe
get it.
that one. That would be a great start. That would be
I
a really
believe you
great
are right.
start. Um,
No, seriously, what is the musical that like touches, like makes your heart dance and sing and come to
um,
life?
you know what? I did the musical Pippin when I was like 18, and I'm not sure if you are familiar with that one, but it's another Stephen Schwartz.
We like
And
this. We like the Stephen Schwartz.
it follows a boy named Pippin who's like coming of age, and he's going through all of these experiences in life chasing the extraordinary to
Oh
only
yes.
to only discover that what he really wants is something ordinary and simple, right? And so there's a lyric that I love, and it is, and if I'm never tied to anything, I'll never be free.
Yes. Yes, Stephen
Yeah.
Schwartz. Yes. Speak the truth. We think we should be unbound and like
Yeah.
all this stuff, but it's in those connections and those relationships
Mm,
and those
right.
calls that
Yeah.
bring forth the best in us. It's a pain in the ass to
Mhm.
like be married forever and be like, oh,
Yeah,
but
I
here we are.
yeah, I feel like that's something that I continually like adjust and learn and grow from in my life is like boundaries and what they mean
Yeah.
and yeah.
You know, I'm going to leave you. I love that Pippin, Mr. Schwartz. There's also a Mr. Sondheim
Oh,
and
I love Sondheim, yes.
Mr.
Such
Larson and
yeah.
Mr. whoever.
We
There's
could
got to
talk.
be some misses. Are there any misses who write plays
There
and
are some.
musicals?
There are some.
Yeah. Fun
But
House, the woman who wrote Fun House
mm-hmm.
or Fun Home, Fun
Fun
Home,
home. Yeah.
Fun Home. That was so good. I was like, cried the whole time. Like
Yeah.
one of my prayers begins this: Allah, Buddha, Jesus, Mother Mary, God, Yahweh, Sister Dorothy Day, Brother Martin, Father Lewis, whatever your name, whoever you call, whoever you use, call me, use me, right? My heart is broken, the way is unclear, the path is long, my spirit is humbled, my son is hurting, my neighbor is crying, the guy under the bridge needs a meal, my spouse needs to be heard. Who am I? What can I offer? Just this, my broken heart that still beats. Thank you, thank you, thank you. My old ears that still hear. Thank you, thank you, thank you. My feet that have journeyed long that can carry me from here to there. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So carry me, God, however you do that, from here to there, and I'll follow and I'll walk and I'll listen and I'll stay awake. Though the night is long, your light will guide me. Amen. So it's that kind of book.
Yeah. Beautiful.
That's the kind of prayer I write. Can
Mm-hmm.
I offer you a blessing real quick?
Sure. I will
And your peoples, your
always accept.
followers,
Absolutely.
like your 12 disciples
I shall receive these blessings. Yes.
and your disciples,
Yes.
they
My
can
disciples.
hear it too.
They can.
They can. This is our closing word, okay?
Okay.
Whitney Ann Jenkins from
Alrighty.
Pittsburgh.
You can stop saying Pittsburgh.
Oh, you don't want anybody to know where you are? Are you
It's okay.
hiding from the law?
I'm not
Are you
hiding.
using a trust fund to hide from the law?
Well, it's complicated, but
I meant Philly. I meant Philly. I'm in Alaska. Tell me about your trust fund.
oh,
That's another conversation.
that yeah, maybe next week.
Yeah, just edit out the Pittsburgh stuff and put in like Anchorage, like this robotic Anchorage.
No, no, it's totally fine. I'm just kidding.
May life surprise you today. May a sense of grace come out of nowhere in the middle of your daily tasks. May a sense of peace find you in the unlikeliest of places. May a sense of courage and renewal find you. May God's love surround you. And may a gentleness, a returning quietness, and a restoring stillness be with you now and always. A restorative wholeness is yours to claim and embrace. And may faith, hope, and love be your constant companions. God bless your day. Amen.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That was great.
You're great.
If people would like to purchase your book,
Oh, yeah.
where can we lead them to?
Uh, Seeds of Devotion is available at Amazon, Barnes and
Okay.
Noble, Cokesbury, which is a religious group bookshop. They can find me on Facebook at Roger
Okay.
Butts, and I'll send them a copy.
Perfect.
You know, I've got a
Yeah.
few copies.
I will. I'll add some
The
links.
UUA bookstore.
Okay.
The UUA bookstore.
I will add links into the show notes so people can just click on it very easily.
I have a second book coming out
Oh, okay.
called Praying the Poets. It's not quite done yet, but it's about using poetry
Oh,
to wake up our spirits and touch our true selves.
I feel like I would like that one a lot, very much.
It's
that
your
how you
musical. It's,
is that how you came across Rumi? Do you want to talk about that for a second?
Rumi. I just have known Rumi for a long time.
Okay.
And the University of, let me tell your people this, the University of Chicago Press has a collection of Rumi poems that are very different than what the newer people say.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you really want to not divorce Rumi from his context and from his
language,
Muslim Sufi self, check that out, because so sometimes these translators, you learn more about the translator than about Rumi, right?
Yeah.
But this academic, it's really fascinating. It's really the deep end of the pool. I don't know what it's called anymore, but the University of Chicago has a collection of his poems that are just stunning.
Thank you for that tip. I shall check that out.
And keep shining and keep blessing the world. You're blessing the world. I can just see it in your eyes and in your face.
Well, thank you. I'm trying to do my part.
That's all we can do.
Still figuring it out step by step.
Oh my God! You look like you. Well, okay, yeah. You figured out. It's a lifetime of great adventure.
Yes, absolutely. So I do have one last question that I ask my guests before we.
Oh yeah, my dog came in. I think my dog, my black lab came in. I think she wanted to answer a question.
Well, she can answer too. Absolutely, she can answer this question.
Now she left. Damn it.
Darn. We'll do a podcast with her. Maybe.
Oh my God. Yeah. My wife, when COVID hit, my wife is also a minister. And when COVID hit, she started a podcast called Jesus Has Left the Building.
Nice.
Yeah, about all these ministries that are going on outside of church buildings.
Huh. That is very clever. I like it.
She is very Italian and very clever and very loving.
Okay. Where from Italy is she from?
Well, her papa came over from somewhere like Mount Cassino or something, like pretty close to that, agricultural.
Is she a really amazing cook? Does she cook amazing food?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Don't even start. Her name is Marta Fioriti. And so she can cook. Her papa owned restaurants and stuff. He was brilliant.
Perfect. So the question I ask is, if your inner voice had a billboard, what would it say to the world?
Keep shining, keep blessing the world. Keep shining, keep blessing the world.
Great.
At the heart of all creation, there is a goodness from which we come and which we live our fullest, to which we shall at last return. And that is the ultimate reality.
Mm-hmm.
That's too long for a billboard. So keep shining, keep blessing the
You could
world.
have a couple in a row. It might be okay.
Keep shining, keep blessing the world.
Yeah.
And see in the face of everyone you encounter and everything you encounter the revelation of God.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much
Oh,
for sharing your time and your wisdom.
well, such as it is. It's great to meet you.
You too.
Blessings on your path.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you so much for joining me this week. If you're listening and you like what you hear, please consider subscribing and rating this podcast, as it really helps get this podcast out to other people who might be interested in hearing it but don't know about it yet. And also, if you'd like to contact me or reach me, you can reach me at unconditioningpodcast@gmail.com or unconditioningpodcast on Instagram. Thank you so much, and until next time, stay tuned in to you.